cycle. I mean, to your point, it's been 10 years. We know that for a certain class of worker, things have been fine for a long time. But just because all that is true, I mean, this report to me suggests there's no reason to think we're late cycle other than the fact that it's been 10 years since the recession.
Right. Well, 10 years ago, the economy and what was driving the economy isn't the same. If you look at the numbers around manufacturing, we've changed the way we do business. Technology has been around a long time, but it's very, very powerful in the last 10 years. There's been an explosion around e-commerce. There's been an explosion around the global trade around, not just e-commerce, but the global trade around digital commerce. We're not in the same economy we were 10 years ago, and so the numbers comparatively can't be looked at. If we look at late cycle concepts here, what we're talking about now is we're talking about a whole new generation of workers. I don't know whether it's Generation Z, Generation Y. It's a whole different generation of workers. It's a whole different generation of how we work. If you look at the boom of WeWork, if you look at the boom of what Amazon's doing in terms of shipping and construction, it's just a totally new picture. So when we look at these numbers, we have to understand the context and the lens at which we should look through them are this is a new economy. And this new economy is working, it's thriving, the length and extent of the bull market is historical, just as the low unemployment rate. So we have to change the lens in which we understand these statistics and understand that technology and advancements in how trade works has completely changed everything.
Much better. I mean, 266,000 jobs added. The street was looking for about 180,000. Yes, we have the bounce from the GM workers coming back after the strike, but even if that didn't happen, this number is really a great number, but also how unsustainable is this?
Well, I don't think we're going to see numbers above 200,000 going into 2020. If you think about the broad picture, as Miles highlighted, you have an environment in which you had this large swing, about 40K in between the October survey and the November survey. So factor that out, and you're trending still in that 170 zone, which after the benchmark revisions is actually a little bit lower than that. So you're thinking about a labor market that's adding on average this year about 160, 150,000 jobs. Going into 2020 with an unemployment rate at 3.5%, with the headwinds that we're seeing, cooling domestic demand, we see that job growth number falling to less than 100,000 going into 2020.
But
so it is a maturing labor market.
And I know that a number of economists have said that's probably the number we need to sustain the expansion.
That's the break-even
So
rate.
you feel like it's probably around that 75 is the break-even, or closer to 150? Because the San Francisco Fed kind of has a 50 to 150, kind of a broad range there. Well, that's basically the margin of error, right? On jobs.
That's right.
It's a large margin, but yeah.
That break-even rate is the rate at which the unemployment rate stays steady. And whether it's 120, 150, or 100 really doesn't matter that much. What matters is whether we're adding more jobs than the labor force is growing at. And right now we're doing that just barely, but as we go into 2020, we think we'll fall slightly below that, and we'll see some moderation in both the labor market and income growth, which will weigh on consumer spending. A gentle glide into the new decade rather than a recession, as some have been.
I'll take a gentle glide. Jared, what have you got over at the Interactive Board?
Well, we see stock futures heading higher here. So we did a little bit of a retracement, but then accelerated, and we're making new session highs right now. S&P 500 futures by 3138. Let's check out the Dow, and we can see the Dow is 27,854. Not that far off from 28,000. Might get those hats out pretty soon. And then we're also going to look at the euro versus U.S. dollar. The dollar is strengthening, so this is the euro selling off and the dollar strengthening, and gold taking a leg lower here on these growth numbers. And we can see that it almost touched about 1470 right here.
All right, Jared, thanks a lot. Greg, James, Jared, we're going to ask you all to stick around. We'll come back to you in a little bit. We want to check in now with Inez Ferre, who's at the New York Stock Exchange. She has a special guest, Tim Anderson, a trader down at the floor, for reaction to this pretty stellar report, Inez.
Alexis, I saw Tim's reaction when this 266,000 number came out. Tim, you said, oh my God, what's your reaction to this?
Well, I was concerned we might have a little bit of a miss because last month we beat consensus by about 40,000, obviously coming out of the auto strike. Plus, we had very strong revisions from both August and September. Now, those revisions are usually a leading indicator that things are going well, and clearly this report is just a great report for the economy. Now, if we were in an environment where people were concerned about the economy overheating, and if we had real inflation concerns maybe staring at us just around the corner, this report might be a red flag. But we are not in that environment at all. This is just The only possible downside to this report is that this may encourage President Trump to do even more saber rattling with China on the trade issue. So if you're really concerned, if you think that the settling trade with China is everything to the market and the economy, this might delay that process a little bit.
We saw growth in healthcare, manufacturing, revisions upwards. Were you surprised by this?
Well, the manufacturing, I think, is a lot of the auto suppliers, even though, look, when the strike ended, the workers came back the next day that were UAW workers, but then a lot of the suppliers that feed into the system, it takes them a while to call their workers back, and for them to come back, sometimes they have discussions about how many people they want to bring back right away. So I think this is a lag on that, a very positive number. It's curious that it's so different than what we saw from the ADP report on Wednesday.
And how sustainable is this? Can this performance continue like this?
You know, we got even more upside revisions in September. And we had not that much retail growth. Retail was one of the shortfalls with the ADP report. I know that the retail environment is changing significantly, and it's always been a brutal landscape in and of its own. We're going into the holiday season. I just think that there's no real negatives in this report.
Thanks so much, Tim Anderson. Alexis, Miles?
All right, Ness Ferre live on the floor of the exchange. Stay with us here on The First Trade. We'll have a lot more on that November jobs report coming up right after a quick break.